Welcome, everyone, to the New York City Workforce Drop. I'm Greg Morris, CEO of the New York City Employment and Training Coalition. So let's just take a minute to enjoy each other's company. You know, if you're the kind of person right now listening to this pod, I hope you are relaxed. I hope you're on some sort of comfortable chair. Your hound or your pet is at your side, and you're digging in, maybe with a beverage, something appropriately warming next to you, and just enjoying eyes closed, off the clock, just listening in. I want that for you. I want for you the feeling of smooth jazz, and the reason for that is because, let's be honest, our lives are chaotic. The world is spinning in all sorts of different directions. If you were on the subway today, as I was, you saw a mass of New Yorkers inside that tube underground. Everything around us, there's nothing but energy in the space that says, I want to be home, or I want to be in a safer place, or I want to be in a quieter space. And I think, and perhaps this has something to do with how life has changed post-pandemic or otherwise, people are even more conscious right now of their space. How many times is it recently on the train where I've seen people say, I need my space. I need my Did we forget to take our backpacks off or put them down? Or we just forgot about that at a certain point? It's as if, because I have my headphones on, because I'm looking at my device, I am thinking I am on some plane that I can, space that is empty and there's no one there. But the reality is there's nothing but people around you. New York, why do we do this to ourselves? Oh, one more thing, New York, and this probably won't be a story by the time this drops, but I'm just going to put it out there and say it. If someone doesn't want to be in a snowball fight, don't bring them into your snowball fight. Just let's leave it at that. I want to make sure that you are here today knowing that I am thinking about you, I am worried about you, drop listeners, because there's so much happening in so many different ways, and I want for you this moment of relaxation. Now, we're going to dig into a pod that's about the topic of housing, and that is a tough topic to wade into by every means imaginable. But I want you to kind of get into it from the headspace of we can do better than this. We know we can do better from this. In fact, take it from the perspective of when it comes to housing and how our city addresses homelessness, in many cases, we already know what works. We already know how to do things better. We actually have results in some cases that tell us the story of how it is that we can ensure folks have access to housing in a hurry. And Jeffrey Ginsburg, the president and CEO of Volunteers of America, Greater New York, one of the largest housing and human services nonprofits in the region, is going to join us today. And he's going to talk about his journey, both from the perspective of someone who is in the education space, a break in between focused on music, and then we're going to dig into where he is now and the effort to think about how it is that street outreach and shelter and transitional housing and permanent housing and this street-to-home model, which is so essential because, as I think Jeff will tell us, the idea of creating stability and that roof over your head, regardless of your age, gives you the ability to chip away at all the other crisis points or complexities that exist in people's lives. My last note on this before we jump into the pod in full, I've been digging into this book called There Is No Place for Us, Working and Homeless in America. It's by Brian Gladstone. And I just want to read this particular paragraph here before we jump into the pod. Because he writes in the epilogue about this story of how it is that people who are working are homeless, how homelessness has impacted individuals. He says, it doesn't have to be this way. Ours doesn't have to be a society where people clocking 60 hours a week aren't paid enough to meet their basic needs, or where parents have to sell their plasma or food stamps or go without electricity in order to keep their children housed, or where your ability to afford an apartment is contingent on winning a voucher lottery and spending years on a wait list, only to then lose the voucher when no landlord will accept it. In the richest country on earth, nobody, whether they work or have a disability or struggle with addiction or mental health challenges, should be deprived of stable shelter. Mass homelessness arose recently within our lifetimes. It's worth reminding ourselves of this fact, because if it hasn't always been like this, then a different kind of future is possible. Jeffrey Ginsburg joins us today. He is from Volunteers of America, Greater New York. Listen to his story. Enjoy a beverage. Find your quiet space. Enjoy your New York, and let's make it better tomorrow. Welcome, everyone, to the New York City Workforce Drop. Hey, Jeff, it's good to see you, man. How you been? Doing all right?
I'm doing good, Greg. Thanks for having me.
We know you know where we knew each other? It's finally struck me, after all this time, East Harlem tutorial. That's where we met.
We did. I literally thought of it on the way into
Isn't
the
that
studio.
I was like, I know
We met over at Isaac's.
That's exactly right. So I have my career, executive director of the Isaac Center.
Yeah.
I got to know you at East Harlem Tutorial.
We did. Totally had forgotten it until
Right.
this week.
And you and I were on a panel recently.
Yes.
We were sitting next to each other, and you've teased me about that to no end.
Yep.
You can tell our listeners why you were teasing me if you want.
Well, here's the thing, listeners. When you're moderating a panel in front of maybe the whole New York City Council, theoretically you don't want to be on a Zoom at the same time. But the problem is, what if the person on the Zoom has maybe just as much influence, power over your life as the people.
Could you imagine a circumstance
so
like
suddenly you end up in that situation. And then what you do is you just elbow this guy next to you and you'd be like, right in the middle of the panel, be like, hey, do me a favor. If this goes out, you just take over the panel.
Yes,
it's
you got
gonna
it.
be fine.
Because you totally got it. You totally got it. We're
you.
totally under control.
Yeah, and meanwhile, I was just smiling on the inside. It was wonderful.
I literally had an earbud in, listening to, trying to. I love that we have shared that as well. So these are our.
That ended up a pretty good panel.
Stories.
That's the funniest part.
And it worked out great.
It did.
And it was a lot of fun. And you're fantastic. East Harlem Tutorial was amazing. Can you start there for a second?
Sure.
You had tremendous history there, and then we'll pivot to today. But I'm just curious because I remember engaging with you, and you were, all of what it was accomplished, and how it was accomplished in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
You had hands in.
Well, shout out to MNN because I used to walk by
Love
it
MNN.
on 104th Street.
Yeah.
As I'd head over to
the Firehouse.
Yeah, to the Firehouse.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're in this cool place on 38th Street that everybody should see. But MNN was along my route of almost 18 years in East Harlem. It's always going to be my favorite place.
Yeah.
Probably never going to change.
Yeah.
I'm still back there once in a while, actually pretty often. And it was there that I came there as a sort of late 20s person and was super embraced by that community in a bunch of ways that I probably didn't deserve and they didn't need to. And I ended up working as an after-school educator and eventually a schools co-founder with a lot of great residents and supporters and families and students. Ended up starting 5 schools there alongside these after-school programs that had been in the neighborhood since the 50s. Built a couple school buildings, including one on 104th Street, which is why I was on that block and down that street.
Yeah.
And wonderful organization. I think it's a model of what we should be doing, a combination of authentic resident sort of user and design thinking, really responsive in a real way to a community, along with bringing in whatever resources you got to find from other places, maybe sometimes just a few blocks away in the Upper East Side that had some extra.
There you go, a couple extra hands.
Yeah, so extra money, extra hands, lots of things.
Right,
so, yeah, still love it. When my students at the schools I started, when those kindergartners finally graduated senior year of high school, I thought maybe it was a good time for me to graduate with them.
Yeah.
Great successor who's there, Marina Cofield, is excellent. Still get to talk to my students, still back there every few weeks, et cetera. still helping out the place. But 2 years ago, after a whole transition period, I became the CEO of Volunteers of America, Greater New York, which is where I am now.
Congratulations on the new gig. Congratulations on all the tremendous history in East Harlem. Of all the neighborhoods, I've worked in a number of neighborhoods over the course of my career. And I think the most substantial lessons I learned were in East Harlem. And I think you've already flagged a little bit of that, which is about community.
Yeah.
The pride, power, resilience of that community, that neighborhood, I felt it from day one. It took me a while to embrace it, and it took a while to be embraced. And so I know what it feels like in some ways to try to find a footing in a particular place. How did you find that footing in East Harlem?
A lot of really smart and loving and thoughtful people who were willing to give me advice and willing to be my friend and willing to give me loving critique and help me grow. I think also my desire, willingness, excitement to just be there and to just walk around and exist. And I think that's one of the hardest things to do as a leader sometimes, is to just actually exist and be and listen and learn and watch and just be available and be very open. And I'm not totally sure where that came from. I mean, part of it is I knew I had a lot to learn and I wanted the information. And then two, I think one advantage of working around students a lot is you realize that you need to listen to students more than you need to tell them. And so then if you want to model that as an adult, you got to do the same thing. And so, I always say to everybody who will listen that the biggest thing I've learned is if you just pay attention to what young people are paying attention to, your life will probably get a lot better. Young people will always guide us in the right direction. And so I think that's what sort of spurred it on. I still try to apply that to everything I can today. Just being accessible, being available, and trying to listen. Just because someone gives you a title doesn't mean that's shit, right. Basically. That's right. In fact, it can be the beginning of not knowing anything. That's right. And if you treat it the wrong way. And so I think that's really where it started. That's where it began. And I try to never forget that no matter what I do. Yeah,
I think one of the things you learn over the course of time is the more you think you have all the answers, the less likely it is that you do. True. Children are truth tellers in every way imaginable. And if you're embraced by them or the older adults in a community, you can really get some traction.
Yeah, and I think, what I'd add to that is I also think, hypocrisy dies much quicker with young people. That's right. They will point out your BS so fast.
They can tell.
Yeah, absolutely. But by the way, they'll do it usually with more love and with more support than adults might do for each other. But they will point it out. They will call it out. And I have, after school English class lessons, I can remember where I found I had the greatest plan, and it was just a bad plan. And because I was building relationships with students, student would just kind of be like, this doesn't make a lot of sense. Could we try it this way, try it that way? And you'd be like, oh yeah, what was I thinking? And so I think that's just an incredible thing. And there's so many ways that teachers and educators don't get enough recognition. But one really core way is that the best educators and best teachers are models really for how all adults should probably act in this world. And that always, that goes wherever I go.
I in preparation for this conversation, I went back into the files. I found a video of you accepting the NYU McSilver Award from 2023. And when you accepted the award, this is what you said. This is a little bit of a tone setter here, I think, and it builds on what you said. Children will believe what you show them. If you show them that there's only one counselor for every 300 students, as we have in New York, for every 400 nationwide, if you show them that you made a bigger effort to get your stadiums open and your bars open and not your schools, if you show them that they're not in the stories that you read or the stories that you talk about or the teachers that are in front of you, if you show them that they are not brilliant and beautiful to begin with, that they've already got that thing, if you show them that, what matters after that, if don't talk to me about math, STEM, reading, or all those subjects, they've got to know those things. But if you already show them that they don't matter, that they're not already beautiful, and they're not already heard, I don't think the next sentence matters. That's pretty good stuff.
It's a long sentence. Yeah, I could do a little tighter, but I think the point is, there. I do feel that way. I'm still angry. I'm honestly still angry, and I still think there hasn't been enough accounting for the fact that we literally did have sports games going on and bars and restaurants open and all these people all doing these things, but the schools were not open. The schools didn't have the materials that we needed to stay safe. I'm still upset. It'll get me emotional. I'm still upset about a student of mine that passed away from COVID.
Sorry.
I'm still angry about a teacher that I worked with who passed away from COVID. I think that it's nothing wrong with expressing that anger still, because if I'm carrying the anger, I'm also going to remember. Most things I don't want to promote carrying anger over. But in this case, it was a travesty, and that McSilver Awards was the first awards coming back after COVID, and I definitely was still carrying that. I'm not about bringing notes to those things. I didn't have any there, but that's what I felt sort of as I had the extreme honor of receiving that award. I can't say enough. That was one of the honors of my life, and I'm very proud to be a McSilver Fellow now, still at NYU, and I think we should not forget how much that still affects the way we operate now. There's a generation of students, and a generation of their parents and their family members, their cousins, their aunt, their uncles, their grandparents, that experienced not only medical trauma, but really saw a clear view of what mattered. And that was that wealthy people could head off to their second homes, or had all the equipment they needed, or could work from Zoom. And, it wasn't easy for anybody. I really don't think it was. So I'm not just saying, hey, just because you had money, it was fine. People suffered of all income brackets. But ultimately, black and brown people, people with less income, got absolutely pummeled by this virus. And then, of course, add to the insult we have today, this idea that vaccines didn't matter, don't matter. When I watched the impact of people not having equal access to vaccines. So I appreciate you raising it. And as you can tell, I'm still passionate about what I said then to I am today. And it's a big reason why I'm doing what I do now.
Well, I will say this. First of all, thank you for your service, your commitment, your passion. The pandemic is a running theme through this podcast series. I don't think it's happened. It's been an organic sort of thing. I mean, it may be the case that we pose a question or two, but I think those of us who are in the business of serving or seeking to serve need during that period are impacted in a way that everyone has been impacted. I think there's something particularly challenging upon reflection about being someone who is responsible for serving the community while you're trying to take care of yourself, to your point about how it is that people you worked with died. And as well, to your point to this day, where there are people who, it's always interesting to me, the people who are I don't hear the people on the ground who are in that saying anything about challenging vaccines or masks. I hear it being people who never had to worry for a moment about what it felt like to be in an environment where you literally didn't know how you were going to get through the next. And only because of your creativity, your passion, your resilience from the community, from the people you work with, that you figured out how to just get one foot in front of the other we're not talking about a week. We're not talking about a blizzard that shut down the city for a day. We're talking about months. We're talking about a year. We're talking about more than a year. So again, it's been this kind of interesting theme because I think those of us who are in some connection to this business of human service felt something and feel something different.
Yeah, and I think if you ask any human service worker, they will have a lot of these feelings. They also will be really proud, and they're also going to talk about incredible things they learned from it. So there's an interesting dynamic, right? So I've been at Volunteers of America Greater New York for 2 years now. I'm with, these thousands of people who, worked through this on the ground doing residential work and work in shelters, work in permanent affordable housing. And I wasn't with them on that. I was with them in spirit. I was doing other things.
They don't know you in that way.
No, but you catch beautiful moments. We were dealing with a really difficult facility issue in the storm, like many people were, and just noticing yesterday, someone said, we had way worse during COVID. I've got this. Yeah. He's like, if I could handle that, I can handle this. And I was like, cool. Like you can use it also to know what you're capable of, right? And to build community. And so I like when we take away the learnings we had from it too, and the ways that people came together. Right? My brother worked at a hospital at the time in the emergency room, and it was very difficult. And he's very proud of that. I'm very proud of him for that. Right? So, and there were things they learned. We're going to get more into this, obviously, but perfect example. I've heard incredible stories about the way we provided housing for people during COVID in a way we seemingly can't do outside of the pandemic, which is incredible. Suddenly we had people in individual rooms and they had supports they needed and they were getting food they didn't have. It's like, hey, wow, we can do it. Right. Now, also frustrating, we don't just still do it. But let's remember things that we can accomplish, did accomplish, and let's build on those to do it again. Yeah,
the gift of having gotten to this place is that we learned some things, we experienced some things. We also know what epic failure feels like. We know what not knowing what's ahead feels like. Yeah. And also, the thing we couldn't imagine, we worked our way through. So what are you going to throw at us now exactly? Totally. On that note, so you transitioned from East Harlem tutorial to just, so if I understand correctly, you decide at that point, hey, I'm just going to take it easy. I'm going to lay back a little bit. Right. I'm going to go from education and East Harlem world, and I'm just going to lay back and just kind of focus on, I don't know, housing and human. What on earth inspires this particular change, and what are you hoping to accomplish now? Yeah. And I guess I have to start by saying, and I was teeing up the McSilver piece because I think there's something about your orientation about how it is that you think about people and what they need to know and understand that I'm guessing probably influences where you are now as a starting point. Yeah.
So, side note, I actually did have the privilege to take some time in between, and I actually did another part of my brain, which would be another podcast, which was I went back to my prior music career, which I tried to do before all this, and actually made an album. So, you can play me out on this thing when you edit it up later.
We have to, yes.
But, I think there was
my crack research team did not have the album queued up, and I'm a little distressed.
Well, I kind of hide it under a moniker, the band's name called Jones One. So, the not so hidden now, is it? No, but I think
everyone, please download immediately.
Yeah, but it's got a couple 100,000 streams in there. It's not too bad. You can join us.
Go ahead. There you go.
But the reason I actually mentioned that was because it was an incredible opportunity after going through so much, actually, to get a moment to think and to do something artistic and to process the world a little bit. And I do think it mattered sort of for my leadership and my abilities in it. It's an extraordinary privilege that almost no one gets, and I never take it for granted. But I did have that time. And I think what I was trying to do in this shift and what I'm trying to do now is honor the fact that about a fifth of our students at a given time in our schools and programs were experiencing homelessness. Mm-hmm. And obviously that mirrors about the system today, which is extremely sad. You've got tons of school districts that are looking at that 15-20% marker of students that are homeless. And what I was feeling was that we've got to make these systems all work better. If I'm working with a student and they're doing really great, and the families, not only is the family experiencing homelessness, but then they get transferred to a shelter that's 2 boroughs, away, or 3 train lines away. Mm-hmm. That is ridiculous to expect that we can keep up the progress, and it's just unfair to the student and the family, and that was very frustrating. I secondarily had a story with a student and a family that I knew, and that I realized they were so upset about their transfer and they didn't want to be late for school that they were living out of the back of a bodega next to our school. So my experience was such that I felt like, okay, we really need schools to be great, period, end of story. And schools shouldn't say, oh, someone's in poverty so we can't teach or they can't learn. That's ridiculous. So those have to function really well, period. But if we're not shifting the way particularly housing works and some of the basic services for serving those in need, it's going to be really challenging for students to learn on a day-to-day basis. Yes, COVID really put some of this on the highlight reel. We could really see it even more closely in a replay, just how bad it was up close, because you didn't have the Zoom, you didn't have the device, you were dealing with the background noise of your in your neighborhood, in your building, et cetera. But also, we get to see that in the regular day-to-day, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic. And I was just honestly so upset by the amount of young people and their families that I saw that were homeless. I had initially gotten into nonprofit a long, long time ago, essentially by actually doing concerts and planning concerts to support hunger and homelessness. It was way back in college and just after college. And I had kind of sort of stayed on involved in it in ways over the years, whether it was just feeding people meals as a volunteer or getting involved with fundraising for issues around homelessness or doing advocacy. I studied it a bit when I was at the Kennedy School looking at housing and homelessness policy with this sort of legend in the field named Bill Apgar. At one point had been head of HUD. So it's something that was constantly around. And then also social work and mental health. My mother was a social worker. I was involved with McSilver and thinking about issues around mental health all through these years as well. So it was, on its face, it was a bit strange, but in some regards my life was leading and my career was leading toward looking at sort of broader poverty and housing issues. Secondarily, while it's by no means the same, so I'm always careful the way I articulate this, but building 2 school buildings from scratch on corners in Manhattan did make me have to become like a developer in parts. I had to learn a lot about how you build stuff. And I both learned a lot. I learned how difficult it is. I learned how rewarding it can be. And I also just learned a lot about how it's done and how to build community support for that and how to get through all the hoops that are thrown at people when they just want to build anything, so whether it be schools or housing, et cetera. And I kind of got the bug for that piece too. And so I thought maybe the idea of going to an organization that was trying to build and develop more housing, because we have a couple billion of worth of housing in our pipeline, which I can talk about, but we also run a lot of housing now and a lot of facilities now. In addition to be able to look at issues of mental health and homelessness, that sort of all felt like a fairly natural trajectory to me. It's a big trajectory in that I've had to learn a lot. There's a lot of learning curve to going from that organization to this, but the issues all feel tied into the actual experiences of poverty that we really throw at people, and also some of the justice issues layered onto it. So I am a huge fan, constantly telling people to read The Color of Law if you haven't, Richard Rothstein, and just understanding how much our housing issue is tied to racism, and issues of racial justice, and so those all felt very tied together for me as well.
To take it a half step back to two things. More than 154,000 New York City public school students experienced homelessness during the 24-25 school year. Just make a quick note of that.
Yeah.
Nearly 1 in 7 students. Over 70% of sheltered individuals in New York City are families with children. Just kind of noting those numbers for folks that people on this listening may be familiar. But
I'll make it even simpler from a Volunteers of America point of view. A lot of people actually only know us through this thing called Operation Backpack.
There it is.
So Operation Backpack, at its simplest level, is we give a backpack to every child who lives in a shelter who's going to New York City public school. To meet that number this year, we packed 30,000 backpacks. Okay, and they're all used. So we need to do 30,000 backpacks to kids that are living in shelter going to a school on the first day of school. So very proud of the operation that we put together to pack 30,000 bags. It's an absolute scandal and a disgrace that in New York City we have to pack 30,000 backpacks.
You could argue it's not even it's a bare minimum in terms of, and again,
Sure.
it is a massive undertaking to be
Sure.
able to facilitate, and I'm not
No,
taking
no.
anything away
Of
from that, but to your
course.
point, like,
It's- of course.
what are we talking about?
Of course, it's a great thing to do to help kids get ready for school.
Sure.
It's interesting because it turns out they've done a lot of studies on this. It turns out people, I'm not sure everyone always realizes this, they spend on average between like $1,500 and $2,000, believe it or not, for their kids back to school, between the clothes and the stuff and
Yeah.
the calculators and all that. And actually, it's really hard when you get off to a bad start at school. Does it, just because we do the backpack, does it guarantee a kid has a great year? No, I've been in education. I know it doesn't. But if you start out the year without any of your materials, probably not going to go that well.
I'm already
So
a
it's
step behind.
Yeah,
this
it's
at
already a
least.
step we can do. And so we're very proud we do it. We think it makes a big difference. And also we do it in a way that kids aren't called out. You don't get some special backpack. It looks like a regular, stuff you have. So you can just also try to experience school like all the other kids. At least in that way.
And to take it back, hardest thing about building something in New York City. Again, we could have
Yeah.
a day's worth of podcasts
Sure.
on that and not even scratch the surface.
Sure.
But
Sure.
as you think back, and I think this ties directly to this city in which we've got housing challenges,
Sure.
and there's lots of reasons why. But I'm curious, just from having built things here or helping to facilitate building things here, what got in the way the most?
The only reason there's silence is there's such a long list. I mean, I think, but at the end of the day, the lack of political courage, the lack of political will, and to call out sort of a lot of the opposition for what it is, which is, we're so quote unquote lefty in New York City, but not that we're not lefty on this block though.
Yeah, not in this neighborhood, right? right.
Yeah. I mean, we're all for this, but not right here.
Yeah,
and
you don't
there's
mean,
a
you don't
reason.
mean where my kids are going to
Yeah,
be.
I mean it's a cliche, but it's important to keep talking about what NIMBY is, right? And I think, but most people do actually want. Well, first of all, I think nearly all New Yorkers can agree that we feel disgusted and embarrassed by seeing other human beings on the street being treated the way they are and going through what they go through. Secondarily, we all know that housing is wildly too expensive for most of us to afford, even people who have jobs and may even have decent incomes. So we all know that we need to treat people better, and we all know we need more housing, and it has to come down in price. But what does it mean that to make it happen? It means that we do need to build. We need to build more. We need to build quicker. We need to build more affordable. We do need to build more, period, and that would help. But we particularly need to build more affordable housing units. And so, I think it's hard to have those conversations when you don't have enough leaders who are backing you on it, and when you don't have enough. People in positions of authority that are willing to really do it. We have them, by the way. There's some great elected officials and great government officials who are there, but it really takes everyone to be on board to make it happen. I think secondarily, and I'm not going to pretend I'm an expert yet on it, but there's been a lot of reports that we can direct any of your listeners to about that just sort of take you through all of these sort of steps in the process that just caused New York to be, literally essentially the slowest city to build in the country. And it's brutal, and it costs hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars more for these units just because of the system, not because of the materials, not because of literally just because of these stops along the way in the system, and then those prices get passed on, obviously, to those of us who want to rent, those of us who want to build, and to residents who have the least. And so, yeah, there's a lot of steps in the way, but I would say the biggest thing that is disheartening and that we have to push through is just making sure that we're really supporting this to happen and willing to take some political and risks to get it through.
You are a Politics New York 2025 nonprofit power player. They had a little Q&A there with you. How can policymakers and everyday New Yorkers support your organization? I just highlighted this. You said, real change only happens when public will and public policy work together. I think you're leaning in that direction in terms of
Yeah.
what it takes to be able to address a problem, like homelessness. I wish more New Yorkers maybe were as frustrated, angry about who they see in the street. I think you had said we have hard feelings about that, and I think not every New Yorker does. But if we were in a position where we wanted to see real change happen, how do we connect public will and public policy? What have you seen work? What are you working on now to try to address the most significant challenge I think most of us would point to, which is related to housing?
Well, first of all, I'll push back a little. I mean, we don't need to make about every single New Yorker, but I do think I really do believe, and maybe I'm just naive or too optimistic, but I actually do think the vast majority of New Yorkers are uncomfortable, maybe for a variety of reasons, but they're uncomfortable. But they're uncomfortable and do feel some sense of sort of shame or embarrassment or anger or sadness about seeing sort of what I'd call sort of particularly 5,000 to 6,000 New Yorkers who are really living on the street. And they're frustrated. And now, look, some might be frustrated because they don't want the person on their block, or they're having some really feelings that I wouldn't call the most humane. But even for them, they do want to see a solution, right? But I think most people actually, you walk around with your kids and, you walk around your day to day. I actually do think most people, I'm just not sure people all know what to do or what can be done, and they're also just kind of pushing through their day, which is not crazy, and they're just not even sure what the situation is, and so I do think we all want a solution there. Public policy, public will. I mean, they're obviously interacting every day in what goes on. Since I just talked about the public will, I'll talk about public policy for a minute. There's a whole bunch of geeky things I could say here, and they'll sound geeky, but they'd really matter. Like our actual laws, our actual regulations around these things really matter. And I really think it's a tough time to say this in this world, but we really do need the actual best and brightest people to work on public policy, whether it be in government or nonprofit or research or think tanks. And so I think when we see so many people, particularly out of D.C., but in general in power, sort of kind of dismissing that government matters, it's just not true. And whether you're sort of on the left or on the right, and you are deeply affected by the effectiveness of government. And, I think there's so many good people. One of the privileges of this job in the last 2 years is I've met a whole series of people that work in city government and state government, particularly city.
Amazing.
That are just absolutely phenomenal. Yeah. And they work extraordinary hours for, by the way, literally no regalia, not even often a thank you. Yeah. And for
the really, backbone of the city and the state.
Not a lot of pay and all these things. And I think that's all really short-sighted. I think we'd really want to lift up who should be doing this work. And I hope particularly, I think this mayor actually has a real chance of doing that. He's younger, he's exciting, and he's trying to sort of make government actually seem like it might matter in drawing people into whatever person may think of his views here and there. I think that's something we could really get that's positive. I hope he attracts people into government and to actually want to pay attention and maybe be a part of things.
With integrity, with passion.
Yeah, with integrity, with passion. And by the way, with abilities, experiences.
And lived experience.
Yeah, lived experiences, community experiences, the ability to execute on something, to be organized, to see a project through, and to be willing to make tough decisions, to be willing to say, hey, that doesn't make sense. Could we change that? Or I know this was the way we were doing it before for a long time, maybe, but we should change it now. And I think those things, whether it be quarterly payments, which I've spent a lot of time talking about in the last year, in which I'm very proud we got unanimous vote from the city council on it, to change the payments to providers, because we shouldn't be owed tens of millions of dollars in back pay, and we shouldn't wonder when the next payment's coming.
That's right.
It's really boring to talk about quarterly payments. I get it. I'm talking about quarterly payments on a podcast. That's boring. But here's the thing. When nonprofits don't get those quarterly payments, we lose millions of dollars, and we can't pay employees properly, and we can't get our job done, which affects literally hundreds and hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers. So these things really matter, and we should respect that.
And on that point, City Council Contracts Committee met yesterday. They had a hearing. Lincoln Ressler, a council member, former CEO of the New York City Employment Training Coalition, hosted that hearing, focused on human services workforce, talking about contracting, procurement, payment, wage equity. I took issue with the hearing partially because the word bottleneck kept coming up, and I'm like, if the sector's owed $2 billion, it's probably not bottlenecks. Maybe it is a system and a structure that is preventing the result we want, or maybe the system and structure was built to do exactly what it's doing.
Yeah, if you want to know what a organization or institution, frankly a person, but we'll go with institution or organization. If you want to know what they care about, look at their budget. Look at what they actually spend money on. And you know, and I think there's also just a basic element of like, you know, if I don't pay the plumber who comes to fix my sink, one, he's going to be upset. Two, he's going to probably take legal action. Three, he's certainly not going to keep coming back. That's right. But that's all what we're asked to do in human services. We're basically told, no, just keep fixing it. That's keep coming back. You know, it's by the way, and you can't really take any legal action.
Now, my favorite part, by the way, in the hearing is that we keep the human services complexities of this moment, as you're talking about. You're owed a lot of money, so people give you a loan, which is that's not what a loan is.
No.
And I again, it's not a bottleneck. It's not a loan. Maybe we need to reframe some of this to say what we're really experiencing in terms of how we're compromising the individuals who do the work work that ensures the city can function successfully and with impact, but also the bare minimum. A little bit about the organization's name.
Yeah. Well, so here's the thing. The one thing we really don't do is volunteer. So it's probably
I was going to say that.
It's called Volunteers of America in New York. And I think it was started almost 130 years ago. And I think the concept back then around what a volunteer was is very different than now. It was the idea of someone sort of doing something out of a belief or a faith and sort of volunteering yourself.
Giving the self and the
giving
service.
of self into service. And so while we do welcome volunteers to help us with things, and you can certainly reach out to us at VOA-GNY.org, and we'll find some way to help. That's not the main thing we do, right? We're mainly a housing and homelessness related organization. We're out trying to make homelessness as disappeared as possible. So it should be very rare, very brief when it happens, but it largely shouldn't exist on a day-to-day basis. We're trying to build housing to do that. We're trying to help people who are experiencing homelessness to not be. That's the main stuff that we're doing. All the supports around that those topics, and so. So the name doesn't do it, but it's been around a while, and we know a lot of people feel positively about it, so it hasn't gone away.
What's the difference maker? I know you're someone who's intentional about your language. When you talk about the disappearance of homelessness, what does that mean? What does that look like? And what are you finding as your organization has found as, I don't want to say a solution, but the strategy?
Well, it's, I'm probably doing this job more than anything for the simple reason that it actually doesn't have to be this way. I mean, I think sometimes we get used to things and we assume, okay, like there's always going to be like a ton of homeless people in New York City, whatever. No, actually, it does not actually have to be that way. We have, as example, at Volunteers of America, we have piloted something called Street to Home. And it's the best name, but the Volunteers of America name's a little tricky. This is a good name, Street to Home. It's actually what happens.
Follow that.
Yeah, someone is out on the street, and instead of having to go through the million steps that we ask people who are experiencing homelessness to go through, where you're at this shelter and then that shelter, and keep getting asked the same questions, and can we match you up? And now it's months at a time, and we're waiting for this other voucher thing to happen. I mean, I could bore the listener forever with how these steps are, but let me just tell you, it takes forever. And person has to tell their story over and over and over again, which is really inhuman, by the way. And then they maybe end up on a spot, and then they have to go to another spot, all of which ends up costing the taxpayers extraordinary amount of money and lots of pain to the actual person experiencing this kind of worst moment of their life, right? And what we've learned at Volunteers America is that you can actually skip those steps. And we've had this great pilot program that we've worked with the city on, where essentially, particularly like end of the train line stuff, or people who have been homeless that are really hard to get off the street, and you basically put them on a very fast path, like pretty immediate, into a long-term housing unit, right? And they may stay there for a year, 2 years. In some cases, I've met someone actually 4 years. And while they're there, we start going through the voucher process. We start looking for a longer-term unit for you. But people are willing to come into those units versus, for lots of real reasons, people don't want to come in to a shelter unit. And these long-term units cost less than shelters do per night. They're much more human. And then when we've got people on more stable ground, we're much better at having that conversation about, hey, what's going to work? What neighborhood's going to make sense for you going back to that job, or seeing that cousin and reconnecting, or what are your physical needs, and what are some of the mental health needs, and how to match that up? Oh, you have a pet, and that's the reason you haven't gone to that shelter, and we've got this place that actually does accommodate having a pet. Things like that. And when you make it work, guess what? That person's not going to be on the street anymore and going to the emergency room for everything, or in and out of the criminal justice system, all of which costs us tons of money and is also not good to people. So I think, getting back to your original question, like, if we do things like that, if we do things like Streets at Home, if we try to prevent homelessness from ever occurring, which is essentially what we do with veteran populations now, which is why veteran homelessness is down to 150 veterans, from thousands. When you do preventive work and you do quick fixes, you can actually really eradicate homelessness the way it is now. Will there be brief moments that people are homeless? Will there be rare moments when it's occurring? Yes. But it'll be nothing near the scale where we're seeing 100,000, 110,000 New Yorkers homeless, 30,000 kids in shelters, as you mentioned before. Just extraordinary. I mean, we've got more people in New York City that are experiencing homelessness than many other metropolitan areas have populations.
Whole populations.
So this is, something really scandalous, and we can do better.
And I think you're doing better is identifying what works, making the most of what works when we know what works, investing in what works. Investing in what works means we have to actually put the dollars into things.
Yeah.
You're also saying we have to rethink how it is that we have operated. Anybody who's on this, anybody who's listening in, if there was a time in your life where you had to go from one doctor to another doctor to another doctor, and you had to tell your story over and over again, and how frustrated you were by that for the simplest medical matter, or perhaps a very complicated one, imagine that's about where you are able to live. Imagine that's about where it is that you need to be able to create some stability in your life. That's what this is, and you're sort of Street to Home is trying to say, how do we get to a point of stability so we can start chipping away at the stuff that's really hard, so we can find a way forward. And I assume workforce development is part of that piece.
Absolutely, because if once you find that right match, it's more likely you're going to be able to hold down the job, right? Because you're going to try to match it up, and that's when we can talk to people about what their skills are and what the things that could work for them as well. That's a hard conversation to have when you're bouncing around from shelter to shelter, and you just lost your job maybe because you couldn't make it from the location that you were just assigned to. I mean, boy, is that frustrating. I'll give you one other piece of this, which is, and here's the big scandal headline of the podcast that we should already all know.
Drum roll, please.
There's empty units everywhere. Folks, there's empty units everywhere. Every day, New Yorkers should wake up upset that there's people that experience homelessness, and then there's empty, affordable units, supportive units, empty.
That's right.
That is a failure for all of us. This isn't some attack on just people working in government or nonprofits. This is the whole system needs to be really shaken up to address this. And street to home is great because we fill the units, right? That's where they're going. When someone goes through the street to, they go into a supportive housing unit that is not filled. And so that should be very frustrating to everybody, and we really have to do better. At least, y'all, let's agree that the units we do have should be filled. While we also obviously need to expand the portfolio greatly. Even if we filled them all, we would still have a big need. So we need to keep developing. But we at least should be filling the units that we do have.
And the key takeaway there, by the way, is that we can feel frustrated about lots of different things. There's no shortage of questions and challenges. But sometimes what's getting in our way is simply saying we know something is right.
Sure.
And we know something makes sense.
Sure.
And there's a political will, as you pointed out, to stand behind it over time.
Sure.
To be able to address those problems. On final question,
sure.
as we wrap up, I have a photo here. You had a piece, an opinion piece, proven recipe for ending homelessness. This was particularly focused, I think, on veterans. And there's a particular photo here of you standing next to our current mayor. I know folks listening in can't hear this, but here it is.
Yeah.
You're standing next to the current mayor. It's behind a line.
I'm the one without hair in this photo, right? Yeah.
You're serving veterans.
Yeah.
And you already made a point of how it is that we're chipping away seriously over the time at veteran homelessness.
Yeah.
And that has been critical. And there's a moment where you are standing next to the mayor, serving in a line of serving folks. And you have a look on your face, bemused perhaps. I'm not sure how I would describe it. But I'm just curious, what are you thinking here, and what was your takeaway from that interaction? Your organization putting on an event, supporting veterans. You're with the mayor at that particular moment. It's connected, obviously, to an op-ed that you wrote about supporting veterans.
I'm bemused right there, and this was actually reported the following day, but I was bemused there because the gentleman there, who's a veteran who's lived in this Commonwealth residence for a long time, was telling the mayor that he's not a fan. And while he's serving him, while the mayor's very gracefully and nicely serving him food, and he's telling me he's not a fan, but he's also telling him that his son is a massive fan. And Mayor Mamdani, this was out, and this is reported news, so this is already out there, said, when I'm done serving food, let's call your son, which he then did. His son didn't pick up, which I'm sure he's regretting still to this day. And he left him a voicemail and said, thanks for all the support, and I'm meeting your dad. Your dad's an amazing guy, and he's a veteran, and thank you so much. So, but I was bemused in that moment of this photo because he's kind of, giving him the news a little bit. He's digging in while he's asking for his plate of food, which I thought great, and that's a beautiful part of this country, isn't it? Like that he can come up there and they can share a meal together and they can discuss what they disagreed on. They had some real disagreements. They had things they agreed on, it turned out too, but they did have some disagreements. That's okay. And they had a great conversation, and that was what was happening in that moment. But I think the proven recipe for ending homelessness, learning from veterans, has been a really interesting thing that I've both knew a little bit about before this job and have learned even more now, which is essentially when we decided that it was not okay, and it wasn't, for so many veterans to be homeless, both in this country and in this city, we actually did something about it. And that is not to take away, there should be zero veterans that are homeless. So the fact that we have a couple hundred right now is too many.
Yeah.
But that is dramatically down, and there's certainly less than the 100 and something odd thousand that are homeless writ large. And we basically came up with solutions. It's a reminder we can. And veterans have lots of the same issues and the same opportunities that our general population does, right? So they're not any special sort of criteria in terms of why we could solve it there and why we can solve it for others. Right now, I think the city is rightfully going to make a push on ensuring that newborns are not born in shelters, which happens all the time. I want to shout out a heroic member of our staff. I'm not going to name her because I'm not sure I've got that permission, but a heroic member of our staff who delivered a baby in the midst of the winter storm. The ambulance couldn't get there quick enough, and delivered a baby in the middle of the night for one of our residents into one of our locations, and successfully did it, and everyone was fine. That's what human service workers are asked to do. But should a baby be born into that situation to begin with? No. And so I think we're looking at special populations. We're trying to figure it out. But whenever we're successful with a special population like with veterans, it's a reminder of what we can do, period. So prevent homelessness from happening in the first place. That's a lot of what the veterans work is. But then two, If they're homeless, get them into permanent units. We're allowed to skip these processes. We essentially have street to home already for veterans. So let's do that.
Populations.
Let's do that for everybody. Why don't we want to do that for kids and families?
Let's
Why
go.
would we not want to do it for adults? That why don't we want to do it for everybody, for our friends and our neighbors? I'm glad we're treating veterans more like they're our own brother and sister now. Let's do that for everybody.
On that note, Jeff, it has been a pleasure. I congratulate you on all of your successes. I feel your passion, and I recognize the pain of what it means to lead in this moment and to be a caring, concerned human in this particular moment, what it means to work towards a better New York. I know you're in this process on a daily basis. Shout out to your team. Shout out to the person who got to intervene in a crisis to ensure someone was born into this hopefully new New York. And I appreciate working on it with you and all the steps ahead. Sir, I know we got a lot more to talk about.
Oh, good.
We'll pause here simply to say to you, continue on, my friend.
Thanks, Craig.
Thank you.